really been in a bit of a slump with this category the last few years, huh? Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. Today we're gonna finally be jumping into some long-form Oscar-related content. We're in the middle of my annual ongoing shorts ranking series of the nominees in each of the 23 Oscar categories, but I wanted to dig a little deeper here and bring you some content that focuses on, arguably, the most underappreciated and underseen categories, the short films. I was lucky enough to be able to see all of the Oscar-nominated shorts again this year, so I wanted to talk about them as part of my annual 3-part Rankography series. This way, even people who haven't had a chance to watch them might have an opportunity to at least get a sense of them before the ceremony. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content, like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. I'll be talking about the documentary and live-action shorts in a few days, but today we're beginning with the animated shorts. Of the 3 shorts categories, this is usually the most widely screened, and it was historically viewed as the lightest, though that hasn't been the case for quite a few years now. This year, things were a bit mixed when it came to subject matter and tone. The 5 nominees are Beautiful Men, In the Shadow of the Cypress, Magic Candies, Wander to Wonder, and Yuck. Since this is a rankography, I'm going to be ranking these shorts. But remember, this is just my ranking, not the ranking, so be sure to post your own personal ranking of the 2025 animated short film Oscar nominees in the comments below. Coming in at number 5, Beautiful Men. This is a joint Belgian, French, and Dutch submission, and was directed by Nicholas Keppens. Using stop-motion animation, this short tells the story of 3 brothers who travel to Istanbul to receive hair transplants, specifically focusing on an insecurity-filled day while they wait for their appointments. I've got to say right off the bat, I didn't like this one very much. That might seem a little obvious considering I have it in last place here in the ranking, but it's not uncommon for me to still like the last place film. But that's just not the case here. As with all of the animated shorts, we can approach this film from 2 different perspectives: the story itself and then the animation. So let's talk about the story first, because I do think that is the weakest element here. The initial premise of these 3 brothers waiting for their hair transplants is a little weird, but I do think it held some potential, allowing for an examination of male insecurity and brotherhood. Unfortunately, the story and themes come across a bit flat here. Luckily, the animation is really strong, and saves this from being a complete flop for me. The stop motion is impressive, with silicone characters who are able to seem realistic, sometimes a little too realistic anatomically speaking, but still retain an animated flair. The visual contrast between the smooth skin of these models and the texture of their clothes really highlights the central insecurity of the story, and the addition of other elements like smoke and fog are nice visual metaphors for the initial shame and embarrassment of these characters. So definitely not a favorite of mine, but I'm a sucker for animated films that have rack focuses, so the technical side of this one gives it a little boost. Coming in at number 4, Wander to Wonder. This is a joint Dutch, Belgian, French, and UK submission, and was directed by Nina Gantz. This stop-motion animated short tells the bizarre tale of a trio of miniature people, once the stars of an 80s children's show, who have been left to fend for themselves after the showrunner's death. We always seem to get at least one short in this category that's just downright weird, and this film certainly earns that title this year. This is one of those types of movies that just leaves you questioning how somebody would ever even dream it up, let alone go on to actually create it. This short takes a very morbid and strange look at the aftermath of a Mr. Rogers-type children's show, focusing on what becomes of the puppet performers after the show ends due to the creator's death. Thematically speaking, this movie gets at loneliness and grief and isolation in very strange ways that sort of work, but are also kind of buried underneath the overarching weirdness and unsettling quality of this film. From an animation standpoint, the stop motion, much like the previous film, is really good. It's even more realistic and detailed this time around, and everything about it, from the characters to the production design to the VHS stylization, is so meticulously crafted. It's no wonder it took 8 years to make. If you can get on board with the idea of these miniature people and their situation, then you'll probably appreciate the underlying themes. But if you're easily overwhelmed or distracted by weird, then it'll be really hard to focus on anything else in this whimsically creepy film. Coming in at number 3, Yuck. This is a French submission and was directed by Loic Esbouchet. Using a brightly colored minimalist 2D animation style, this short focuses on a group of kids at a summer camp who pass the time by watching and subsequently being grossed out by people kissing. Grossed out, that is, until curiosity starts to get the better of one of the kids. So this short is basically the polar opposite of the last one, and is by far the cutest, sweetest, and most kid-appropriate of the nominees this year. It's also the most simple, in terms of both story and animation. This movie is a sweetly nostalgic look at childhood, at first love, at curiosity, and at that point in every kid's life where they start to realize their perception and opinions of certain things are changing. Like I said, this is a very simplistic kind of story, but it's one that's universally recognizable. The bright and colorful animation pairs nicely with the poppy electronic score to really emphasize the childlike wonder of first experiences. Easily the most juvenile and cartoonish looking of the nominees this year, this movie uses its comparative animation simplicity to its benefit. One of the most noteworthy aspects of this is the unique visual cue associated with kissing in this movie. Rather than having to rely on dialogue, internal thoughts, or more complex body language that maybe kids wouldn't be able to pick up on, this film indicates attraction and desire to kiss with brightly glowing pink lips. It's a little weird and kind of cutesy at first, but it ends up being a sweet little visual storytelling gimmick that plays right into the childhood innocence angle of the story. Coming in at number 2, In the Shadow of the Cypress. This is an Iranian submission and was co-directed by the duo of Hossein Malayemi and Shirin Sahani. It uses a minimalist hand-drawn 2D animation style to tell the story of a man suffering from PTSD and the effect that it has on his relationship with his daughter. Okay, so I know I've got this ranked in the number 2 spot here, but this one and my number 1 are basically neck and neck. It's essentially a tie for me, so this is how I happen to rank them today, but I could just as easily swap these two. They're very different movies, and I like them for very different reasons. For this film, the standout element to me is the animation. I love the look of this film. At first glance, this movie looks a bit sparse. We have a lot of shots of big open expanses, and even though there's a lot of detail to the animation, the minimalistic style gives it this deceptive impression of simplicity. The tall, stretched out lankiness of the characters makes it clear that you're watching an animated creation, yet somehow it all feels so real and lived in. I think the colors really help with this as well. Much of the film has this bright, yet slightly muted, sun-baked color palette that just works and is very visually appealing to me for whatever reason. Going hand in hand with all of that is the visual storytelling style of this film. This movie has no dialogue. There's some really immersive and impressive sound design, but everything about the story, from the plot to the character development to the moving themes about trauma and guilt, have to come across through the animation. And so the film uses quite a few visual metaphors that pair up with their thematic counterparts to create an altogether powerful short that I think is the best crafted of the nominees this year. And like I said, essentially tied as my favorite. So that means my number 1 Oscar animated short of 2025 is Magic Candies. This is a Japanese production and was directed by Daisuke Nishio. Using a unique claymation emulating CG animation style, this short adapts the picture book of the same name to tell the story of a young boy who struggles to communicate and make friends. That is, until a bag of candy provides him with some new perspective. So, like I was saying before, this film and my number 2 ranked short are basically tied as my favorites. And while I think In the Shadow of the Cypress is the better made movie, and probably the one that's more deserving of an Oscar win, the creativity and fun weirdness of the story in this one are what won me over. Now, I've never read the book this was based on, so I'm sure many of the creative elements that I like about this film are thanks to the source material, but there's something so enjoyable about the premise of this one for me. Coming-of-age journeys of self-discovery through magical realism are certainly nothing new, but I love the way this movie approaches the idea of perspective, and how your view of something or somebody might not be as accurate as you think. This movie tells its story through a series of candy-eating vignettes that build upon one another. The first is silly and weird to really hook you, but each subsequent candy offers a different, much more emotional piece of the puzzle of life. the love of a pet or a parent, understanding loss and death, and learning how to communicate and connect with others. This is a movie that manages to feel fun and silly and wondrously weird, but it still hits you on a deeper emotional level than you'd probably expect. Every year, in addition to the 5 nominees, the animated shorts reel usually has a couple additional highly commended films that just missed the cut for being nominated. In the past, I've also talked about and ranked these highly commended films, but unlike last year, I can't do that this year, because they didn't include any, which is always a bit disappointing, since they tend to be better than some of the actual nominees. We had a stretch like this a couple years ago, but they brought the highly commendeds back last year, so I thought we were back on track with it, but I guess not. It's especially weird considering the animated shorts reel is less than 90 minutes long this year, and they usually use the highly commendeds to pad the length out a bit. Oh well, hopefully they'll be back next year. Alright, so that's my rankography of the 2025 Oscar nominees for animated short film. Have you had a chance to see these animated shorts? If so, what does your ranking look like? I'd love to see some reasoning for your order, so be sure to post it in the comments below. Also, be sure to check out my rankographies of the documentary and live-action shorts later this week, as well as my entire Oscar ranking shorts series for all 23 categories. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this rankography, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button, and if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it to see more rankographies like this, as well as movie reviews. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.